we see the small cleaning companies, the catering companies. Now, maybe you can give us some insight about the scope or the opportunity for those small businesses to actually get involved in mainstream business activity. Are we there yet as South African entrepreneurs? And let me start with you, Kristia, and throw to Cheryl afterwards.
Yeah, I feel we are there. There is lots of fairly good small and medium businesses. That's not just for the cleaning and for the security of the, let's say, the mines or the manufacturing concerns. They are actually in the supply chain, and they are a tier 1 or a tier 2 or a tier 3 type of supplier in the vehicle industry, where the vehicle manufacturing and even vehicle services, there it's happening. In the mining industry it's happening. You get small businesses that's in hydraulics, in the engineering side, and so on. Very good, solid businesses, also empowered businesses. So it is there, but I think just the barrier to entry is just too high. And I just hope that we would see the light and actually ease on labor laws.
Cheryl, do you think that if we look at incentives as another element of getting entrepreneurs to take up the appetite to start up their own businesses, is the government doing enough to entice young South Africans and even older South Africans that have business ideas to consider sort of breaking out of the of corporate South Africa and going it alone?
I think the government is doing a lot, to be fair to the government. Where I find the challenge, and I don't know if everyone would agree with me, is I think our entrepreneurs are thinking too small. We don't have enough people thinking big. So we've got a lot of really great small businesses. I would challenge the fact that we have enough of those small businesses that are looking and saying they will become the next Discoveries, they will become the next Bidvest. And that, I think, is where our challenge lies, in pulling that push factor between getting those small businesses to become the future market leaders that we need them to be.
And what are your thoughts on having a Ministry of Enterprise Development and that kind of thing, having a whole department just focused entirely on SMEs? What are your thoughts on that?
As we've heard, it can just be another barrier to get over. So, government they can only create the environment. It is entrepreneurs that want to be out there, want to do it,
that
want to make a
happen.
difference. And that is part of our education system, and what is embedded into the culture. Do you want to be something? And do you want to get it for free, or do you want to work for it and be an entrepreneur and sweat it out?
So do you believe we're lacking a culture of entrepreneurship here, and a sort of
an appetite, if you will,
for taking risks and for failing? Because we've often been criticized for being a nation that's too scared to fail and for being very risk averse. Whereas in America they have things like FailCon, which is a conference where people just go there and talk about how they failed, and it's glamorized. Whereas here it's seen as very, very bad, and you can't get up after that, and you're blacklisted.
I would hate to say that we don't have a culture of entrepreneurship. I've met some really, really great businesses over the years. We've got to, and I agree with you, we've got to celebrate the failures. We've got to talk about the entrepreneurial journeys a lot more. Because I think our youth particularly start to think that it's easy. They forget that it is a journey. A lot of our really successful entrepreneurs failed more than once. So we've got to do.
And I don't think those stories are told enough.
Not enough.
I see you nodding, Kristia? Can I just ask one question? Is there something that entrepreneurs can do? We're talking about all these barriers to entry and how tough it is with labor and education, etc. What can entrepreneurs do to help make this barrier sort of less hectic so that other people can also get into the market?
Well, they must lobby and join even organized business groups, through the formal business structures that's there, and actually use the bodies affiliated to BUSA and so on, and knock on the doors of government, knock on the doors of labor, and actually tell them about their real problems that they have, but also those that successful must speak out about their success and how they overcame the obstacles, because there's definitely very good stories, you know, of how they overcame the obstacles.
Of course, and on that note of optimism, and Cheryl, you speak about having come across a range of businesses over the years throughout your work. Is there one small business or entrepreneur that stands out for you as a really fantastic South African story that has managed to not only circumvent the very barriers that we're speaking about now, but really stands as a case study with lessons that can be extrapolated?
I can think of more than one, but do you want me to share it?
Just one, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And I think it's one that's work in progress. And I mention these guys all the time because I wish I was like them at that age. They're a group of young entrepreneurs called Pellegrin. They've started an energy company. We first met them through our own enterprise development initiatives, and they've recently really started to corporatize and grow. And I wish I was telling you the story 10, 15 years from now, because I have no doubt that they're going to be a success story. But when I look at them, when I look at the intelligence, you know, and I look at that group of people and the drive that they have, I would certainly say that there's a lot to be optimistic about.
And so perhaps what it sounds like to me is that we also need to be creating platforms where these stories can be shared, and that these entrepreneurs that have managed to circumvent some of these barriers can actually share on how they've managed to do that.
I would agree. I think there are lots of good stories out there, and probably as members of the media we're a bit guilty in that we only listen to the companies who have the fancy press releases going out. But there are a couple of initiatives that are really doing amazing things. I just thought of their Where To project. It's another great one. It's doing amazing things. So these stories do need to be told. So those entrepreneurs that are out there, you know, shout loud and tell us what you're doing, because it's inspiring and others need to see it being done as well. Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of that conversation. Thanks to our guests, Cheryl Jane Kuchenga, who is Strategic Growth Markets Leader at Ernst & Young, and Kristia Burt is Executive Director at Business Partners Limited. Time for a short ad break, but we'll be back with some top personal finance tips right after this. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa. Welcome back. Now, according to Stats SA, women tend to live longer and are seen to earn less than men. Now, as we close off Women's Month, we get more on how these factors affect how they should save for retirement and the financial implications of the inferior economic position of women, and how they should prepare for retirement to ensure that their money doesn't run out too soon. On the desk with me is Jessica and Kristia, as well as Lynette Wilkerson, a certified financial planner from Chartered Wealth. From Cape Town, we'll also be joined by Tracy Jensen, product architect at 10 Times Investment. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Now, Lynette, to a large extent, throughout the month of August, we've been hearing the stats that women tend to earn far less than men. In fact, 28% less than men, if my stats are correct. How does this translate into what we should be doing when we're thinking about retirement and the saving we should be doing?
I think regardless of what your earning potential is or how it compares, it should be a priority, and it should be a priority from when you start working. I think very often women have the idea that someone else down the line will take care of that, or it will become a priority later, and they don't make it a priority from day one of working. And I think that would be a big change and would make a difference.
A lot of women, or just generally workers, their pensions, they assume that their pensions, their retirements are taken care of by the company that goes into a fund. Should they be thinking about it over and beyond what their companies do for them and have a separate fund, or is what companies do for workers enough?
Very often it's not enough, because what attracts the worker to that company is, what am I taking home? And very often the packages are structured in such a way that the amount of funds going into the retirement savings is reduced so that your take home looks more attractive. So people go, great, this is an opportunity, I'm getting more money than I did before, but at what long-term expense? And I don't think they get involved in that discussion. The discussion is, what am I taking home? Not at what cost am I taking this money home?
Do you think that there's enough education around South Africa for people to know exactly how much you're supposed to have by the time you retire?
No. And I don't think the HR departments in companies help. They're trying to attract people, and they're trying to do that by offering them the best take-home package. And they do it very often at the long-term detriment of your savings. People don't know, and they don't think about it, and they assume the company's doing it. They don't even pay attention to what the growth is. If you ask someone when they come in for financial planning advice, what is your pension fund returned over the last few years? They have no idea. They don't get the statements. If they do, they don't look at them. They don't pay attention. And if we don't pay attention, we definitely can't blame someone else if we're not going to have enough.
Tracy, let me bring you on into this conversation. Would you say that women tend to be better savers than men, or are we shooting ourselves in the foot in that comparative game too?
I think women generally aren't as disciplined, and it's really crucial that they need to be more disciplined than men, because at retirement, women actually need more money because they live on average for 4 years longer than men. I think in general we're also quite bad with budgeting, so we tend to buy and focus on the things we want rather than the things we should actually need, such as retirement.
I'm sitting here feeling very guilty about my lifestyle and my lifestyle choices, but something that you've raised, Lynette, which I thought was rather interesting, about this idea that we have as women that somebody's going to come along and take care of it. Now, as a lady sitting at the desk without a ring on my finger, I still have that hope that somebody is going to come along and take care of it. If we look at just in terms of psychology and the way we're raised and the society that we're raised in, why do women seem to believe that marriage is also going to take care of everything else, including life after he's gone?
I think it's historical. It's the way our parents and our grandparents thought. But we are not those people. Most women today work because they want to. They have to also, but they love their careers, they want to work, they want to participate. So if you want to be economically active and economically equal, then you have to take equal responsibility for your financial well-being, now and into retirement. I don't think any adult can make another adult responsible for their financial security. It's just...
But just to be fair,
acceptable.
and perhaps this is a question for you as well, Tracy, is that aren't women, when they become involved in families and they're taking care of young children, they have school fees to worry about, isn't the emphasis often on just the family and the well-being of the family, and then yourself, women are generally quite selfless, and the maternal instinct kicks in, and then they forget about planning for themselves. They're too busy planning for their families.
I think if you make, as a family, the decision that the woman is going to stay at home and take care of the children permanently or for a period of time, in that discussion you have with your partner, you need to say, how are we during this period going to take care of my financial security going forward? Because
Tracy,
you can't assume that they're going to be around.
Tracy, do you concur?
I definitely agree. There is also a risk, planning together, because you often see it in divorce settlements, the way the finances are split. But I think really you can't just keep kicking the can down the road. Another thing, a lot of people use their retirement as an emergency savings when crisis happens. All you're just doing is delaying the inevitable.
Tracy, you mentioned that women live longer than men. Do women, in addition to their retirement savings, also have to have additional savings to prepare for medical costs that you have as an old person?
Yes, I think this is critical. So the longer you live, generally the higher your medical costs, and medical inflation is also typically higher than normal inflation. So it's a double impact. So women live about 25% longer than men, and on top of that you've got medical inflation, which hits you a lot harder.
Just to add
crucial.
here, I think a big problem here is financial literacy. Women just don't get involved in planning at a young age and in learning about stocks. And it is still stocks and trading. It's still a man's world. And I think women need to force themselves to learn about those kinds of things, so that when they do sit at the table with a financial advisor on their own, they know how to have that conversation.
I agree with you. I think it's taking responsibility for your financial well-being, and part of that is educating yourself.
I like the way Tracy's brought this concept home a little bit. She says saving for retirement is like shopping. Now, Tracy, can you just unpack that analogy that you use? And I think if you do, maybe a few more of us might actually begin to buy into this idea, if we can identify with something that we all love doing.
Okay, I agree. I love shopping, and I think most women do. So what typically happens when I go to the shop, I'm not very good with planning ahead. So I come back home and I think I've got all these amazing items, but when I think about it, I haven't actually got anything that I actually needed. So I think it's very similar when we don't plan. So in other words, when we don't have a budget, at the end of the month, we realize there isn't enough money left for the things we really need, and that includes retirement. Another analogy you can take from shopping is you would never go to the shop and buy something without asking how much it costs. So why do we do this with our financial services? We never query and ask what are all the fees, and disclosure is often poor. And this is really critical. I'd like to challenge you, actually go home and pull out the benefit statement you never look at and actually see there whether they disclose your returns before fees, your total fees, and the return after fees, because fees are a really critical way to actually gain more money at retirement without you having to save more.
And are fees something that you can sit down with a financial advisor or a retirement planner and negotiate with them? Because when I think of those forms that you just don't want to read in the black and white, the small print, you kind of think, well, it's there, I'm not going to have any impact on it. Can you change it and negotiate with them?
You absolutely should. You should be having that conversation as a starting point. You're paying for a service, and you need to understand what you're paying for and what you're getting in return.
Lynette, I have a question. Considering that women's retirement needs are different from men's because we live longer, because we earn less, shouldn't there be a retirement investment product aimed specifically at the needs of women, at large medical costs when you've retired and different things that women would require?
You know what, if there was magic in numbers, that could happen. But the fact is, what you put away, how much it's going to grow by after costs is what you're going to end up with at the end of the day. So we have to be more aware, we have to take responsibility, and we have to make sure we put enough away, because there's no other way to do it.
I want to bring Tracy back onto that question around the fees and whether there's scope to negotiate those fees. Tracy, what is your view in that? To what extent should women be pushing the envelope a little bit with their financial advisors to make sure that they're getting value for their buck?
I think one important thing to ask your financial advisor is, how are they actually deducting that fee? Is it a rand amount, so charge like a professional service, like you would go see a doctor and they charge you a set amount for that? Or are they actually taking a percentage of your money that you're holding, your total amount in retirement? There are financial planners that actually charge you a rand-based amount, which over the long term has a massive impact. If you can just save 1% in fees, so 1% of your total balance you have, you can actually have on average 30% more at retirement. That's over a 40-year time period. Now I know that sounds extreme and it sounds implausible, but if you think about it like this, every year you've lost a little bit of return, and next year you're earning your returns on a smaller amount, and the following year on an even smaller amount, and it's really compounding impact is dramatic over 40 years.
I mean, to one extent, I also want to go back to the question of accessibility to information and guidance, but I want to tag on to this concept of innovation. We're seeing a lot of insurance and financial services in particular piggybacking on technology, and suddenly things are available online and you can make these decisions without the stuffy man in a suit coming to advise you and coming to take your money away. Lynette, are you finding that innovation and technology is making the information more accessible to women at all?
No, because they're not choosing to access the information. I think it's not that the information is not available. I think it's easier to be thinking about your family and what's currently urgent rather than what's long-term an important factor.
So Lynette, could you maybe give the 5 questions every woman should ask when she starts investing, like a checklist of things that we should be thinking about? We've got the fees, and we've got the fact that we earn less and we need to put away more and that sort of thing.
I think she needs to start at, what kind of lifestyle would I like when I retire?
Oh, that's easy.
And when you know that, it's not that difficult to work it back and say, okay, if this is what I want then, this is what I need to do now to get there. Okay. Because that makes it more real. For someone to say save X percent, unless you say I want to live like this, and if I do the following, that will enable me to do that.
Kristia, I think that's a fantastic question, and I think one that I'll also throw to Cape Town with Tracy. Tracy, 5 things that for you are the fundamentals when it comes to advice that one would give to women in terms of, as they're considering a retirement annuity package or whatever this financial service is, what are the key 5 questions they should be asking?
I definitely agree with Lynette. You need to know what your goal is. You're not going to achieve anything if you don't know where exactly you're headed. So firstly, determine what it is you need to be saving, and then set up in your budget, work towards it slowly. There's no use trying to get to 15% of your salary, which is more or less how much you need to save to get a 60% replacement ratio at retirement. But set smaller goals. So in 6 months' time, I'd like to save 5% and so forth. So firstly, determine what you need to contribute. Secondly, work towards actually having emergency savings, and then ask them about all the fees. So make sure that you understand the fees. Ask them exactly what fund is suitable for you. If you're far from retirement, it's better to go into more, I don't want to use the word aggressive because it has connotations, but fund that invests more in companies and less sort of in bank accounts. And as you get closer to retirement, then you can reassess the options based on what you're going to do. And then make sure that you track and monitor it regularly. So take a look at it once a year or once every 2 years and ask, are you on track to where you want to be?
Is there something that you can do if you find that you're not happy with your retirement fund? I know there's a lot of fees involved, for instance, if you want to move between funds. What can you do? Can you approach your financial advisor and say, listen, I'm no longer happy with the fees I'm paying. Is there an option like that available?
Definitely. Not all products charge you fees if you leave or if you switch. They call them older generation products do charge you, but you can query it. For example, our company 10X Investments, there's no penalty fee, but we can also assist people to do a comparison. So we can give them all the facts and do an investigation of what they're currently paying and what they could be paying. So there definitely are options for people out there, and I would encourage them to actually ask their financial advisor to present them lower cost options that don't charge you penalty fees or switching fees.
And just to answer your question about the technology and the platforms available, I think we need to remember that there's a huge segment of the population that still doesn't have access to formal banking institutions, and they're making use of things like stock files and that kind of thing. But I think as technology becomes more sophisticated and we see things like banking via cell phones, technology will play a huge part in helping to make these investment platforms more accessible. But that could still be something that's coming down the line.
Of course, I think, unfortunately, we have to wrap this conversation, but before we go, 15%, 15%. That's where we're headed, right, ladies? Now, thank you so much to Lynette Wilkinson, financial planner at Chartered Wealth, and Tracy Jensen, product architect at 10 Times Investments. That's all for this week's edition of Finweek Money Matters. Remember that you can get your copy of Finweek in stores today, or get it digitally in either English or Afrikaans on mysubs.co.za. A special thanks to my co-host, Finweek journalist Jessica Hubbard, and Kristia van Heerden, editor of Finweek.com. We'll see you again same time next week. For me, Nozipho, it's goodbye.